Over the past several videos, I've been discussing how we are going to restart civilization, what we're going to do. Now, I think it's absolutely self-evident that the current system is not sustainable, so I'm not going to argue about that. If you accept this premise that we need to do something if we're going to survive into the future, well, we need to address what and how we're going to do it. Collecting tins of beans and lots of ammo is just not enough. So I've been discussing this over a few videos, and the topic of this one is to address some of the comments and criticisms and challenges that have come up in the comment sections over those videos. And what it boils down to is, given that we are living in the present system, and that while it's not sustainable, it's not going to evaporate overnight. Given all of that, how does one keep a wife? It's one thing to get married. It's a whole other thing to make sure she doesn't divorce you and ruin your children and ruin your investment in the family. Now, perhaps I should amend this. Not how do you keep a wife, but how do you keep a wife without losing all of your masculine virtue and becoming effeminate? Because certainly, if you want to keep a wife, the divorce rate, it's 50%, maybe lower than that, depending on how you look at it. A lot of the people getting divorced have already been divorced, and should we include them in the original statistics? But when you come right down to it, if you want to keep your wife around, earn a lot of money, do whatever she says, and, buy that overpriced McMansion out in the suburbs. Become one of those idiots that says, happy wife, happy life. You keep your wife around, but your kids are going to grow up to be progressives, and your line dies with them instead of you. Now, the question is maintaining your masculine virtue, is holding on to your mission while you have a wife. How do you do that without her using the threat of divorce to tear everything apart? And for the record, your masculine virtue does not mean playing video games and getting drunk with your buddies or whatever. Okay, it doesn't mean acting like a teenager. It means having a mission and a direction and standards that you set for the family. And we've got a two-pronged problem with all of this. The first is the whole divorce industry. Massive amounts of money being made off of tearing couples apart. Massive amounts of propaganda being funded to convince women that the grass is greener on the other hill. And of course, there's always going to be an excuse. There's always going to be some other guy that's taller than you, that has a fatter wallet, whatever. Doesn't matter how alpha you are, there's somebody that's more alpha than you in some other way. And so yes, this current system is very hostile to marriage. And the other problem we have is that men's instincts are misfiring. I mean, good Lord, try and talk to any baby boomer about what's happening with divorce law, what's happening with domestic violence law, what's happening with the affirmative action in the economy, and every single one of them starts white knighting for women. The thing is, we as men are programmed to protect women and to take care of women, and these instincts are being manipulated so that they support feminism even from men who would not describe themselves as feminists. Now, this is a problem, to use Myers-Briggs terms, this is a problem that exists separate from the NT subcategory. Now, the NTs only make up about 15% of the population. They can see what's going on, but the rest of people, the rest of the population is not going to be quite so analytical. And the perfect example of this, look at the protector archetype, the cop archetype. Most cops are not bad guys. Okay, yeah, you get a few bullies into the mix, you get a few guys with chips on their shoulders, but even those guys, they're not a bully working at a used car dealership. They're a bully that wants to go crack heads of criminals, right? They enter it with good motivations, but because they're not intuitive thinkers, they wind up following the policies and procedures, and maybe 15 years later, they realize that everything they've been doing has only been increasing the anarcho-tyranny. But for the time being, they go along to get along. That's what most people do. So yes, we've got this systemic problem because the majority of people are being led around like a bull with a ring in its nose. Their instincts are being used against them. Well, let me tell you how I know I'm not going to get divorced. And this is related to the look of the samurai I've talked about before. That's what my old martial arts instructor called it. It's when you are willing to go to the mats, when you are not going to back down, when you are not just talking smack, but you're actually going to go all the way, nobody's going to mess with you. They can see it in your eyes. They can see the look of the samurai. And so what you need to realize about marriage is, in the legal sense, in the technical sense, women have a unilateral nuclear bomb. And they can constantly threaten that, right? Even without saying it, if we don't go visit my mother for Thanksgiving, then I could always hit the divorce button. You'll never see your kids again. I'll take all your money. It doesn't even have to be brought up for it to be a threat. And so here's the thing. How do you respond to that threat? This is where the look of the samurai comes in. This is where knowing what you are and what you're willing to do, that's where this comes in. And listen, I'm not talking. I am 100% not talking about those guys that say, if she ever divorces me, I'll kill the bitch. Listen, 99% of threats are never followed through upon. The guys that say, I would kill her if she ever divorced me, those will be the first guys to crumble. Because guess what? Chimping out and murdering your wife, even if she did something horrible to you, chimping out is not the mark of a samurai. It's not the mark of a berserker. A berserker doesn't chimp out. He holds on to that rage until it's the right time to let it loose. And by the way, I need to give credit to the late A4 over at womens.wordpress.com, because he went through this. He went through this with a woman that absolutely threatened him with everything, and he took the nuclear option that only men have available. And that is to say, I will not negotiate. I will not negotiate my sacred honor. I will not negotiate my rights as a father and my rights as a husband. I'm not going to initiate force against you. I can't in this civilization. I mean, yeah, you could sneak into her apartment at night like some sort of thief and... Sure. But you've got no legal recourse. You can refuse to play the system. And as A4 said, I might not have supervised visits with my kids under the watchful gaze of some overweight, double-digit IQ, immigrant government bureaucrat. But my kids, when they finally tire of the lies from their mother, will know that they had a father who was a man. Now listen, being willing to go to the mats, whether that means quitting your job, burning down the house, and spending the rest of your life in prison because you won't pay child support, or if it means refusing supervised visits. When you refuse to negotiate, when you refuse to go to the mats, when you refuse to sell out your sacred honor, nobody can touch you. Doesn't mean that you're not going to get into a fight. You might die. You might be locked up in debtor's prison for the rest of your life. You might have your kids taken away from you so you don't ever get to see them because you wouldn't agree to supervised visits. It might go that far. But when it goes that far, you win. And when you are deep down, when you are willing to go that far, 99% of the time, nobody will test you because they can see what you're made of. So that's why I'm confident that I won't get divorced, or if I do get divorced, I'll deal with it. I'll deal with the consequences. But we get back to this problem with the NTs, about 10-15% of the population, and everybody else. With our current system, we have to do what's in the best interest of the child. Right? This is the maxim which led to this toxic divorce law that winds up destroying children by having them raised by single moms. Best interest of the child is what destroyed the family. But when you say this to your average person out there, when you say this to them, best interest of the child, it sounds reasonable, doesn't it? And so it's in the best interest of the child that you negotiate with the divorce lawyers and accept some sort of settlement. At least then we get to visit your children. Not realizing that you're selling out your sacred honor. Society needs moral leadership. Right now we have immoral leadership. We have amoral leadership. We have leaders that are exploiting our instincts to make us useful little ants in their ant colony. This is why part of the preparation, not just for the future, decades or even centuries down the road, but part of the preparation for what we are doing with our own lives is forming these male hierarchies. Because when you have this tribe, this organization, this order, and the leader is laying down these standards, that leader can inculcate this attitude, this look of the samurai. Again, your average person out there, when they confront the divorce court, well, that's supposed to be the patriarchy. That's supposed to be the trusted leaders of society. If your trusted leader is yelling at you, you must have done something wrong, so they capitulate. These same men that are so weak and effeminate in the face of this feminist gynocracy, if you put them onto a battlefield against a Islamic soldier that was raping a 12-year-old girl, they'd have to look at the samurai there. The problem is that the rules and regulations, the attitudes, the values of our society have been poisoned. And this is why we need to start forming these larger collectives that hold the members to account, hold their wives to account. I mean, hey, you want to divorce one of our members? Guess we can't stop you because we're not the state. But you're never talking to anybody here ever again. We're not doing business with you. We are not introducing you. You are excommunicated and dead to us. Or you could make up with your husband. Up to you, sweetheart. We're not using force. We're just going to shun you. And because we have this organization, this knightly order, whatever you want to call it, we enforce those standards on our members. So good men that maybe they're not cut out for leadership. They are still good men. They are still very practical men. They are virtuous. We are going to inculcate those values in them. We are going to hold them up to the standards of heroes, and we are going to make them into heroes. And folks, that's how, if we build it, they will come. And if we build something good, they won't want to leave. Even though, door's right over there, sweetie. So that's how we do it, folks. We internalize the look of the samurai. We create civilized standards that can't be co-opted by these cheap little catchphrases. And we start lifting up other men, to turn them into the best possible version of themselves. Deus Vult Aurini, out.